when do we need tokens? And there's been a lot of news recently, especially in Australia, with one of the big banks, NAB, if I'm not mistaken, launching a CBDC, like a stable coin. I want to ask Annie, because this is probably where you're a bit more clued up on than I am, but what are the pros and cons of a DeFi project launching a token? And then we can shift the conversation to CBDCs and things like that.
So I think when people consider what is a Web3 project, they think immediately of a token, right? This is sort of that element that runs throughout every single project in DeFi. Most Web3 gaming projects have a token-based system or NFTs. And I think a lot of the original ones really launched tokens, and that's kind of what made them famous. So from a pro standpoint, there's several reasons why you want to have tokens, and there's also some pretty big risks. So the pros are, in general, you can try and get a cleaner alignment with stakeholders, meaning your investors, your customers, your product users, if they have a store of value that's linked to your project. And so it's the same reason that, if you're a business, you want to sell shares of stock or equity to individuals because they're then aligned with you in terms of both wanting to add value to the project. So I think this makes sense. And it's interesting because when you think about like a stock, it's effectively just a form of a currency, right? So the value can go up and down when you compare it against the dollar or the euro or the renminbi or whatever. In general, it's still just kind of issuing a new store of value. It's the same way with tokens, but it's even quicker to do so. You can launch a token within a matter of hours if you want for an individual project. It's also, in my opinion, a pretty scalable, efficient, and secure structure. All of those things are really valuable. The problem with launching tokens, especially in DeFi or Web3 gaming projects, is they're usually launched before the project is fully live or like as it's live. And you're trying to get valuations on, in many cases, very early stage or even not even launched projects. This is a big challenge. It's a challenge in Web2 in the financial industry as well. What is the right valuation for a startup that's still 2 years out from launching their project, right? I don't really know. I mean, you can come up with an adjusted value for it. There's a lot of different ways you can approach that. But essentially, the market is doing that for you with a token 24/7. And so there's a lot of volatility that can get added to a project when you launch a token before you have any kind of revenue stream coming in. And I think this is a big risk. That in turn then produces highly speculative markets. I think many of the criticisms that we see about Web3 in general stem from exactly that you're not trying to value projects before they're out. When you talk about like, Web2, early internet startups, they didn't have this problem, right? You weren't trying to value pets.com before their IPO, right? You still had problems afterwards with the valuation, but that was the same, kind of problem in under a microscope where they were then a publicly traded company. Now you don't even have that. You just have a white paper and a Discord server where people are promising this is what we're building, trust us. And until you actually get content or a prototype or an alpha version out, it's really difficult. So those are, in my opinion, a couple of key pros and cons.
I'll keep it clean. In general, I mean, everyone, you got to have these tokens to first and foremost raise funds, right? That's the main reason everybody's using it for. And also, you launch a token to provide that liquidity for the holders that you already talked about as well. But they also can be used for collateral for holders to borrow against their holdings. They can be used as a form of governance for decision making, like we talk about in DAOs. And you mentioned the cons too. They're speculative, they're volatile, and they may not have utility or value. Again, you mentioned that we see a lot of cases where projects launch a token before they even have a product, right? And then it turns out to be a whole scam. And not to mention the regulations and, and we don't even know what that looks like yet. All of these tokens in these projects face regulations that are about to come as well. So it's really, between everything you said, it's that across the board, and we're still going to see that for a little ways to come until we establish some of these foundations, secure foundations and reliable foundations. And I think we're still a little ways away from that.